recording.
Hello, I'm so pleased that you all have been able to join us for this newest cohort of the Physician Leadership Academy, PLA as we affectionately know this course. My name is Peter Giammalvo. I am a part of the faculty here. We have several members of our team of faculty who have prepared, update, and deliver this course over the course of 7 weekly sessions. Let me tell you a little bit about who I am before we get into the content for today's class. I'm mostly retired now, although my friends kid me about not being fully retired. I am a retired healthcare executive. I've worked in hospital operations for part of my career. I have spent most of my career in the leadership development, organizational development space at hospitals and at health systems. And towards the latter part of my career, I have served as a visiting professor in some university programs in healthcare leadership and healthcare administration. So I have a lot of years and some diverse experience that I hope will serve well as I share my thoughts about leadership development, especially as it applies to physicians and other providers in the healthcare space. So I'd like to begin by offering some foundational comments. When we look at healthcare organizations, like every organization, there are two foundational elements that make up an organization that is healthy from the perspective of its human dimension. The first is a robust, visible organizational culture. And a culture, we hear a lot about it, organizational culture, but for our purposes, a culture is defined by the core values of an organization that are overtly demonstrated by the behaviors of the organization, not just the people, but the leaders and the way the organization behaves in the aggregate. The second element is specific leadership competencies, and that's going to be what this course is all about. Specific leadership competencies that describe the requisite knowledge and the skills and behaviors and traits that drive the behavior of leaders in such a way that the organization lives its values, pursues its mission, and ultimately achieves its goals successfully. Now, as we move into talking about that particular issue, let me give you a couple of definitions that will underscore what we're about to talk about in the course. So on the next slide, we'll see the two definitions that I want to spend some time on before we get into it. In your world as a clinical provider, you are used to dealing with clinical competencies. And this is just my definition. I hope it meets what you expect of a clinical competency, but a specific or set of specific well-defined skills that, when demonstrated at an acceptable level in the professional setting, indicates that a provider is competent to perform that task, whatever it happens to be. In my world, a leadership competency is a bit of a different spin. So a leadership competency is a dynamic combination of knowledge, skills, behaviors, attitudes that, when they come together in the behavior of persons or teams, have been shown to produce effective leadership performance in such a way that the organization and its leaders are successful. So leaders being successful, organizations are successful as a derivative of that. So let's look at some specifics in terms of what I mean by leadership competencies and what we have learned over the years about leadership competencies driving behavior. As a foundational comment, we know that a successful organization has a mission that is well defined, a set of core values that are demonstrated, and it has a set of strategies, or a strategic plan, if you will, that sets its direction or vision for the future. We also know, as a derivative of all of that foundational information, that leaders need to be competent to be able to deliver on the mission, live the values, and execute on the strategy. So here's a product, a graphic that demonstrates what, through my work over the years in hospitals and in health systems, seems to be a pretty good summary of the leadership competencies that are required to successfully lead healthcare organizations, whether at the system level, hospital, clinic level, or frankly, even at a departmental level. And many of you have been in those uh, roles already. Some of you may be moving into those roles in the future um, of your career. So let's just highlight a couple of examples. So a leadership competency around relationship management has many subsets. In the upper left corner there, you'll see boss relationships, interpersonal savvy, peer relationships. And we know that relationship management is one of the prerequisites for successful leadership over time, not only of a team, but of an entire population um, in the organization. And that means not only your staff, who may report to you or work with you, but it also means patients, family members, the community. Relationship management is very large, very complex, and the ability to manage those relationships well and successfully is a predictor of successful leadership, and in turn, a predictor of successful performance of an organization. One of my favorites is coming over to the next piece of the graphic there is communication. Um, it's all about communication. What we have here is a failure to communicate from an old movie, but communication is not just getting your point across. And the subsets of that competency, and incidentally, you'll have a handout that defines some of this information more specifically. It means more than just getting your point across in terms of information, but communication also involves the ability to listen and hear what's being said. And the competency also requires some degree of personal disclosure. There's been some pretty good research out the past couple of years about successful senior leaders being able to give of themselves. Now, it doesn't mean you tell the whole team every bit about your personal and family life and so on, but it does mean that you are willing to share a bit about your personal life, who you are outside of work, what your recreational desires are like, what you do when you're not at work, maybe some elements of your family life, whatever you're willing to share. But we know that communication between and among staff, especially from the leaders, is a accurate predictor of successful leadership as well. It means you relate as a human being, basically. As we move across the graphic, no surprise to you that a competency around the ability to perform strategic planning, at least at the level required by a particular position, either in a department or in an organization as a whole. And you'll see that timely decision making is one of the subsets there. Um, Teams and staff are relatively unforgiving when leaders either do not make decisions, make them in a very slow and sometimes slow manner, and sometimes don't make a decision. And staff look up to leaders who are able to identify the decision to be made, gather the evidence, make a timely decision, and move on. Um, and then finally, I just want to highlight the last two competencies there on the right of the graphic. The upper one about values. People, teams, and constituencies like patients, family members, and the community pay attention to the demonstration of values. And in our world of healthcare delivery, this is especially important. The ability to demonstrate compassion, not only towards patients, but towards the staff with whom we work, that we behave ethically according to a set of values, and that we can always be counted upon to act with integrity and trust in everything that we do at work. So you'll see the last three items there in the graphic are what I started with as the foundational pieces. All of those competencies require that there be a healthy organizational culture underpinning all of this, that a set of core values has been articulated, and that people are expected to behave on those, not only the leaders, but the physicians, the providers, those who are in any way involved in demonstrating the life of the organization, and all of that grounded in the mission of the organization, no matter what that is. And it's going to be for all of us, it'll be some sort of a healing mission. So that's a bit of a primer. It's a lot, and I'll ask you to take a look at the document that will accompany your handouts during the course that will define each one of these competencies and give you an example of the kinds of behaviors that are expected of leaders who demonstrate these competencies. So I want to move on to my last slide now, and that is sort of a wrap up of everything that we're talking about in this opening presentation. First of all, there are core principles of leadership development that I have found have served me well in my career, seem to have served the teams on which I have served over the years, seem to have served us well. So the first one is it kind of debunks the myth that leaders are born and not made. I am firmly convinced that leadership is an art and a science. I think there are demonstrated competencies that we just talked about that are required for successful leadership, but I also think there's sort of an art form to how one does that. And I don't think this is an either or. I think it's a both and. The second one is that leadership is a team sport. You can't do it alone. We may have thought that at one time, that a CEO of an organization or of a health system could run the thing. That is a myth. It's a team sport requiring just like any team, requiring different competencies and expertise by different members of the team. But when I'm working with students, I always use the example of a basketball team, and that in a basketball team, everyone plays offense and everyone plays defense. And there are those rare opportunities in a basketball game where you do have to step up to the free throw line and you're totally on your own. But in essence, leadership is a team sport requiring multiple competencies and the collaboration between and among them. As we've just pointed out, there are demonstrable individual and team competencies. So what we talked about for individuals do also apply to the team of a department, a care team on a inpatient unit, or within a clinic. Now you kind of get to the points that I've been involved with most of my career, and that is leadership development. Leadership development is also a team sport. I don't think you go into a classroom or even come to a course like the Physician Leadership Academy and you learn on your own and then you go demonstrate what you have learned. I honestly think leadership development is done in teams, and we have learned that even more so through the various cohorts we have engaged in this Physician Leadership Academy. So the elements of leadership development, it's complex, it's a multifaceted undertaking, and it involves learning styles. We all learn differently, multiple modalities of training and development, some didactic instruction, some of like we're doing now, but also leadership development can be engaged through coaching, awful lot of executive coaching, leadership coaching going on these days, one-on-one, mentoring, which is usually a more intimate relationship between a mentor and a mentee, sometimes within the organization itself. Leadership development is also carried out in stretch assignments that are given to individuals who may have the potential to move up in an organization or take on new responsibilities. And one way in which you can develop an individual or a team is to give him, her, them something to do that is beyond what they normally would be assigned to do. And that's another way of saying also action learning. You can learn through doing. And finally, um, leadership development efforts are most effective, at least I've found this in my work, most effective when they are somehow embedded in the real work of the learner leaders. And in the Physician Leadership Academy, we've tried to stress that everything we talk about in the various classes can be applied in some way, shape, or form when our learners go back to the workplace and maybe even week to week be able to try out something of which we have spoken in the course. So my final comment is that leadership development never ends, never over. Um, Organizations change, environment changes, people change, and therefore leaders have to change. Successful leaders will grow, develop, and change with the environment, with the organization, and with the people with whom they work. And final piece of advice, and I have learned this continually, even at this point in my career, as I do some coaching and mentoring, be open to feedback. The feedback sometimes is difficult to hear. Sometimes you think it's wrong. Sometimes you think it's mean-spirited, but I have learned, and I constantly coach those with whom I work, to be open to the feedback, whether it's right, wrong, mean-spirited, or kind. Be open to hearing the feedback, judge it for what it's worth. There's always something to be gained by feedback from peers, bosses, staff with whom you work, and frankly, even from the patients whom you serve. So I hope the information that I've shared with you has been helpful as sort of a foundational piece of what we think about leadership development, and that it underpins a good bit of the coursework that will be undertaken in the Physician Leadership Academy. So thank you for your patience. Thank you for listening. And please feel free to reach out to any one of us on the faculty as you go through the course. Thank you.